This is Matt Weaver with PopularSpeed.com alongside John Kennedy, also with PopularSpeed.com this weekend. We're heading to Bristol Motor Speedway. If you guys remember, me and Chase Wilhelm from PRN did this on the way to Kentucky a few weeks ago, and it was pretty well received. It helped that we had a very backwoods dirt road to travel on the way to Speedway, and I don't think this is going to be as backwoods, but it's cool just to show you the area surrounding Bristol. It's every bit of as mountainous as you thought it would be, just judging from the videos and the pictures that you've seen. Kind of preview the race here a little bit with John. John, kind of introduce yourself and talk about your background in racing.
Well, graduated University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama in 2009. Spent a couple years covering late model racing throughout the Deep South and doing some radio shows, and covered a couple snowball derbies from Five Flag Speedway, and growing up my whole life an NASCAR fan and keeping up with it. So it's a passion.
So essentially, short track racing is what brought you eventually to Bristol.
That's right.
I don't think I'm really speaking out of line for John when I say this for myself as well, but short track racing is the best kind of racing. It's no surprise that Bristol and Martinsville and Richmond are some of the most well-received races in the Sprint Cup Series right now. This is one of my favorite times of the year in general in NASCAR. The next 3 weeks you have the race to the chase, so a lot of guys fighting and clawing for every spot in the championship standings. Three really good and fascinating tracks for on-track racing in Bristol, Atlanta, and Richmond. Obviously you have the short track, the true short track in Bristol. Atlanta, despite being a 1.5 mile track, it's kind of one of the original intermediate tracks alongside Charlotte. The surface is old and wore out and has had some of the better finishes over the last decade. Richmond, another short track, a little bit longer than Bristol, but just as racy. And with the chase spots on the line, you've seen a lot of tempers flare and a lot of pushing and shoving to get the last wild card spot. And so, looking forward to just this weekend here at Bristol. Everyone remembers what happened last year with Tony Stewart and Matt Kenseth, two guys who were fairly locked in. But I think that you look at some of the guys who are on the chase bubble, as it were, starting from about 7th place in the standings with Dale Earnhardt Jr. You got Casey Kane in 11th, Jeff Gordon's in 14th, Ryan Newman 15th in standings with a win. You got a lot of fast drivers who you've got the risk versus reward scenario playing out here, to where you can't put yourself in a position to get tore up because you can't afford to lose the points, but at the same time a win would go an awful long way. So John, my question for you is who are you looking at to see really make a move here tonight and get themselves into either the top 10 or in a spot to where they can use a wild card and make the playoffs?
Right, it seems like right now it's just such a touchy area because there's 5 or 6 cars right there on the chase bubble, and there's some guys that have 2 wins, and those 2 wins will be enough for a wild card. So you got to kind of weigh it out where do you want to push it or not. But then you also got guys like Denny Hamlin he wants a win, and other guys that are further down, Mark Martin. If Martin's not going to take any risks, but he's a guy that'd like to see to get a win. So there's guys out there that are kind of wild cards in themselves and could go for wins and be aggressive, and that could cause problems for other guys on the chase bubble. Later on down the line, chain reactions happen all the time on short tracks, and you can get caught up in a wreck and be 10 cars away from the initial contact or whatever. So it's 500 laps, and all the drivers are saying it's going to be impossible to pass. Well, it's a short track. This track's it's Bristol. It's always caused tempers to flare. So nobody's going to ride behind each other for 500 laps. They're going to race each other. They're going to lean on each other. People are going to get mad, and that's when I look for around 200 laps to go for things to really kick up, because that's when desperation is going to kind of start to set in. And after tonight, there's only 2 more races to put yourself in a prime position to make the chase, but you can't push it too hard. Like Kurt Busch is a good example. He's 9th in points, doesn't have a win. So if he gets kicked out of the top 10, then you know, he's going to be out of the chase. But if he could get a win tonight, which he's in a great position to do, it could go a long way for him. So, you know, maybe look for Kurt to be somewhat cautiously aggressive, I guess you could say. I mean, if he's got a shot at the win, I think he's going to push it pretty hard, but I don't think he's going to wreck himself and somebody else to try to get that win. I think he'll take the loss, you know, take second or third or whatever it is. But, you know, guys like him or Dale Jr., Martin Truex, guys right there on the bubble, that another win would really go a long way for him.
You know, you bring up the passing, and I think that's one of the more interesting, you know, aspects to tonight's race. Pretty much universally, all the drivers that were in the media center yesterday were not high on the changes to the track and what it means for the passing. Many of them thought that it was going to be a train up top and that there wasn't going to be a lot of room for passing. But I think we're going to see a lot more passing than the track would typically allow for, because you have some guys starting in the back. You've got Kyle Busch deep in the field, Jeff Gordon, Jeff Burton, multi-time winner. All these guys have to go towards the front. And so that leaves you with, you know, two options. The first is that everyone knows that the high line is the preferred groove. You're 2/10 faster running the high line than you are on the bottom, but everyone's up there. And so during the nationwide race, I saw several guys that are going to be in the Cup race tonight. Brad Keselowski and Casey Kane, who were making that bottom line work. Not so much, you know, near the top. No one had anything for Kyle Busch, but you know, when you're trying to carve your way through the bottom half of the field, if you're starting deep in the field, that bottom line might be an option. We saw in the spring to where, you know, some guys like, you know, the first guy that comes to mind is Jeff Gordon, who was kind of stuck in the 6th to 10th position. He stays out, doesn't take any tires, no fuel. He ends up in the lead. Of course, he and Matt Kenseth crashed, and so that didn't work out for him ultimately. But you can gain positions that way because tires really don't matter. You don't need the tires. You need the fuel to last yourself to the end. But if you can get out front, it's not so much clean air anymore at NASCAR short tracks. As we pass Bristol Motor Speedway at the entrance, just a beautiful facility. But it's not the clean air game like at most tracks today, but it is a track position game. So whether it's trying the bottom when everyone's up top, pit strategy, there's a lot of different things at play today, and I do think there's going to be a lot of racing. There's going to be guys dive bombing down to the bottom, floating up and hoping that they don't get turned around, and there's going to be a handful of guys that do get turned around, and that's where we're going to see some helmets tossed, some you know, willpower middle finger specials, a lot of shenanigans in the Sprint Cup race tonight.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, they're going to have to pass, and you know, the slide jobs and all that, and the running down, and you know, not being able to make any headway. That's all going to be things that's going to cause tempers to flare, and you know, cause people to get annoyed with each other. And the race car drivers, they're going to find a way to make. Yeah, the preferred groove is on the top, but like you said, you know, we saw last night some fast cars were able to make headway on the bottom. You know, not necessarily run down the leader and pass the leader down on the bottom, but they were able to make moves when they needed to. You know, like Keselowski started 15th, he finished second. He made most of his moves on the inside groove. So it is possible. It may or may not be the preferred line, but I think we're going to have a better show than what the drivers think it's going to generate. The drivers think it's going to be a crapshoot, train around the top. Nobody's going to dare try to pull out and make a pass because they're going to get freight trained. But I don't see that happening. So for a parting shot here on the Popular Speed pre-race video blog, who's your pick? I've got Kyle Busch starting 43rd. I think he's going to be the first driver to, you know, if I remember correctly, talking to, you know, David Caravello from NASCAR.com yesterday, we both believe that Kyle Busch, should he be able to win tonight, would be the first driver in the modern era to qualify 43rd and win the race. Not start 43rd. There's been drivers who, through provisional means or having to go to the back from other situations, win races, but we believe he could be the first. I think it's going to be Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has won the first 2 races here this week, NASCAR Truck Series, Nationwide Series. I think he's going to complete the sweep and do it in, you know, typical Kyle Busch epic fashion. Who do you have, you know, coming to win the race tonight? Well, if Kyle's going to win, there's going to have to be a lot of things to go right for him, and you know, the track position game is going to have to really play into his favor. And I mean, it's not to say it can't be done, you know, but a lot of not pitting or a lot of two-tire stops. And I mean, you never know how the strategy's going to play out. 500 miles or 500 laps is a long time, but for whatever reason, Kurt Busch keeps popping in my head as, you know, that team's been on the cusp of finally breaking through at victory lane, and, you know, Kurt seems to have his head on straight and, you know, has his eye on the prize of getting in the chase. And he says that, you know, we don't have to have a win to get into the chase, but you know that he'd sleep easier at night being on the bubble that he is to have a win in his back pocket. So, and, you know, people forget Kurt was pretty good. Is pretty good here at Bristol. He's got several wins dating all the way back to when he was driving for Roush. So, you know, Kurt Busch ain't, you know, out of it by any means. So if Kurt's got a in position there at the end of the race, I think he'd be a good pick to win.
I think it's a solid pick. Bristol has been the playground for the Busch brothers for a long time. It could easily be the case tonight. The action is on ESPN. And is it ESPN or ABC?
ABC.
It's ABC. It's on the ESPN family of networks, ABC. So Mickey Mouse has a NASCAR race tonight. It might be a Mickey Mouse show, if you know what I'm saying. It's Bristol. It's Bristol, baby. It's short track racing at the NASCAR Sprint Cup level. Follow along on Popular Speed on Facebook, at Popular Speed on Twitter, at Matt Weaver SBN on Twitter for my analysis. And we'll talk to you again after the race, where we'll be joined by the pre-mentioned Chase Wilhelm. You know, for Popular Speed, Matt Weaver, John Kenny. Enjoy the race.